If you're all warmed up, then I'll begin. Welcome to the confronting debate. Paris Saint-Germain versus Real Madrid in the UEFA Champions League, a match that says it all about modern football. We're asking how these two teams sum up what's great and perhaps what's not so great about the so-called beautiful game. The cash that's been spent to build teams that the commentators regularly refer to as Galacticos, that goes for their talent as much as for their bank accounts. Is this building of a game for heroes fit for their adoring public, or has it skewed, sadly, how the players and the fans relate? Not to mention the clubs themselves. Anyway, let's get this debate kicked off. Our own Galacticos are here to discuss football, the people's game, if the price is right. By phone, we have Pat Nevin at the Parc des Princes joining us very shortly. He, of course, a former Scottish footballer, here for the game itself. Here in the studio, let me bring you our guests who are here and ready to go. We've got Romain Collet-Gaudin, a football journalist with Canal Plus and Eurosport. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Hello.
On the other side of our studio. Not necessarily against him, but there might be some points of clash. We'll see as we get underway. Damien Lemaitre, who's sports correspondent with El País. A Frenchman, but working for a Spanish newspaper. And why not? That's the world we live in, isn't it?
I've got a double identity.
Ah, fantastic. Okay. So as in the media, as in football, as in life, things cross borders, which is a great thing. Joining us from afar, by Skype, from Cologne in Germany, is Igor Mladenovic, sports business analyst and commentator working for The Guardian. You're smiling because you're mocking, I think, my pronunciation of your name. I hope I got it correct. Igor, can I start with you by asking whether you feel the difference, I'm talking business-wise, money-wise, the difference between Paris Saint-Germain and the club of Real Madrid. What would you say the difference is between the two?
Well, the difference is that Real Madrid have history and that Paris Saint-Germain so far have money. And Paris Saint-Germain would like to have Real Madrid's history and are trying to build a team to finally win the Champions League, something that Real Madrid have achieved 11 times. And are still failing to do that, which is obviously one of the main issues at the moment with the Qatari ownership. Knowing that the Emir of Qatar is in the stadium tonight, looking for a victory and a convincing one at that to justify his heavy investment in the club.
Indeed, nothing like a bit of pressure to get the players to perform, you might think. So you're saying, Igor, that basically the issue is that Paris Saint-Germain doesn't have soul. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, that's a tricky definition. What exactly is soul in football? Football is a business. It's difficult to talk about soul, but when you look at Real Madrid's history and their achievements since the 1950s in this competition, it's obviously easier to say that they have a soul, that they have a DNA, that when they play, you know how they're going to line up, and that Paris Saint-Germain is maybe looking for its identity. Indeed, I think you can mention Real Madrid's soul, and that maybe that's what Paris Saint-Germain were lacking in the first leg at Santiago Bernabeu. Yeah.
Igor, bear with us. I'll bring you back in a moment. Our players here in the studio in a second. Pat Nevin's just joined us by phone at the Parc des Princes, so we're taking Pat straight away because I understand, Pat, you've got other demands there working for British television covering this game. Pat, thanks for joining us. Just to put into context, Pat is a former Scottish international, played for Chelsea pre-Abramovich, of course, and I know you, Pat, from your time at Everton, which obviously is my team, and I think half the world knows who I support. In terms of what is going to happen tonight, what we're seeing tonight, Pat, what do you think about the difference between these two clubs? What is it? I mean, Igor was talking about the fact that Real Madrid has history. Is that the difference? Is that what gives Real Madrid the edge, do you think?
No, probably just the better players over a period of time, nothing more than that, which is a real shame because there's so much more that Paris Saint-Germain can do, but it takes a while to build it up. Had they had Neymar on the pitch, had they held out until 1-1, with only a number of minutes to go, in the first game, then this could be in a different conversation. PSG are not that far away. And having watched Real Madrid in the game against Tottenham Hotspur at Wembley, this is not a foregone conclusion. PSG should not write this off just now. My Apologies, I'm going to have to nip off because I'm doing the BBC in 1 moment, but I'll be back with you after past.
Pat, you're great. Thank you very much indeed. Pat Nevin there, working for the British broadcaster, the BBC, who you may have heard of, taking their coverage of the game and analysis, of course, over in the UK. Pat's at the Parc des Princes. Here in the studio, our two guests. Romain Collet-Gaudin, football commentator for Canal Plus and Eurosport. Romain, can I start with you? How do you see this game panning out? What are the factors that matter? And what are the factors that matter off the pitch?
Off the pitch. But the thing is, I'm a little bit agree with Igor, because the thing is, why I'm not agree is Paris has history, because there are 25, 30 years ago, they went until the semi-final of the Champions League. So okay, never they were in the final, never they have won the trophy. But, for example, 25 years ago...
Didn't they beat Liverpool on the way? I remember that.
Yeah, against Liverpool, for example, and against Real Madrid 25 years ago. They have lost 3-1, and they have won in the Parc des Princes 4-1. But it was in C3. This cup now is finished.
That's the European Cup and his cup.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
So the thing is, for me, Paris has the history, but not the history of the Real Madrid. Real Madrid has won 12 Champions League. Paris never, for the moment, they were in the final.
Let's give our Spanish commentator an entry. Double nationality, of course. Who do you support out of interest? Can I ask you that?
No, I'm not supporting Real Madrid or Paris Saint-Germain.
Okay.
I have another team.
So, okay, fine, okay. What is that team?
Well, it's Lille. Yeah.
Okay, Lille's okay. Lille's a good club.
France,
I've been to Lille. It's a good club. Great club. Well, they're a good club. I mean, this thing we're talking about sort of soul, about heart. I mean, they're a good club. They've got great supporters. You know, the supporters sing throughout the game. It's an intimidating place to play, Lille.
Yeah. For Paris Saint-Germain, the objective for tonight is to be the king, no, of the competition of the Champions League, to be part of the stakeholders of this market, because I think Paris Saint-Germain put a lot of money, no, on this market last summer. They have history. They don't have titles, but they want to be. No, they want to be the champions. They need to be to win against one of the best teams of all the times, no? And that's a great opportunity. I think in Paris, they're seeing this match from tonight like an opportunity, no? And not like a fear.
No, but it is an opportunity to, I should say, stake that claim, say this is where Paris Saint-Germain belongs, and we can do it. So there's a sense, and obviously Pat Nevin talking about this, there's a sense, a feeling that this can be turned around. This isn't a done deal. This isn't a foregone conclusion. This game can actually change. And in terms of what this means to Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid off the pitch, in terms of how much money it can generate, it is hugely important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge game between two teams, two clubs, who maybe the richest clubs in Europe and the world.
I saw it was Manchester United, then Real Madrid, then Barcelona.
Yeah.
My favourite team down in 20th, so, you know. We're doing okay, but not good enough.
Absolutely. They got 600 millions of budget, no? It's amazing. They're playing in the same league, I think. And for tonight, they just need to beat the king without Neymar.
You mentioned Neymar. Let me show you a tweet that I made in 2011. This is a tweet about Neymar when he was still playing for Santos, when he was a young, promising footballer. Everybody knew who he was. This is the tweet. It's coming up somewhere, I think. It says something like, I don't know if anybody can see it. Can we see it anywhere in the studio? We're having problems. It says, does anyone think Neymar will end up at Paris Saint-Germain? Now, I said that in 2011. Of course, when the transfer happened, everyone's thinking that I'm like some kind of a visionary or clairvoyant. I've got a crystal ball, which I looked in, that kind of thing. But the point is that then, I said that because Paris Saint-Germain had just been bought by the Qatari consortium. So there was money. So we come back to this issue about money buying success. Money buying success, consolidating success. And is that what football is about these days, the issue of cash?
Yeah, the thing is now all is based on cash. For example, if Paris will lose tonight or will be eliminated, they will have not a lot of money with the reward of the Champions League. And like they have put a lot of money during this summer for Mbappe and for Neymar, they finish at just at the last 16, and it's would be a big problem. But after the thing is the Qatar, so the Qatars for the moment they have money.
Indeed. And just to remind people, the fee for Neymar was what, 222 million euros. So we're talking obviously a world record, an amazing amount of money. And some people, of course, some countries, some people don't have that kind of cash to live on for a year, which is absolutely phenomenal. You know, you think about the situation with the Palestinian refugees and the Gaza Strip. We spoke about that earlier today. They're on 65 million for the entire year. So it gives you an idea of the different kind of skewed balances you have in football and in the world in general. Let's bring Igor back in to talk about the situation. Igor Mladenovic from The Guardian, listening to us over there in Cologne. Germany, of course, a massive place where football is played on a huge scale in front of lots and lots of people, but the clubs there are on a different level, I think, Igor.
Well, it's a completely different organisation to what you can find in France. France is a very centralised country, centralised economy, and French football is currently very also centralised around Paris Saint-Germain, who have a lot more money at hand than other clubs, including Lyon and Marseille. Germany is rather differently organised, and you have 4 to 5 clubs who compete every season in the Champions League, although, of course, Bayern Munich trumps all these. I believe that the whole structure of the football industry in Germany is different. You have stadia who belong to clubs, and you have full stadia, which is something you don't necessarily find in France. The public in France is a little less keen on football. You can argue for having, of course, being born in Paris and living in Germany, that Germany is a real football country, and that France is doesn't necessarily consider itself a football country. Now, I would like to hear, of course, Romain and Damien on this. Exactly.
As you were saying that, Igor, as you were saying this, Romain was saying under his breath, except in Marseille. Romain, tell us about Marseille.
Oh yeah, because you see the city of Marseille, they are living just for football. So obviously they are the museum. They have a lot of things that are different for the culture. But one is a match of Marseille, and every day that you see is the Olympique de Marseille, and the people. They told me a lot, we are not French, we are Marseillais.
Marseille reminds me of my hometown, Liverpool. It's one of these places where football's really, really important, except Marseille has far more sun than we get in Liverpool, sadly. Yeah. We get a lot of rain, which is the way it is. But the issue of and the thing I think Igor was hitting on this point as well, and join in, Igor, if you want to at any time. This issue of heart, of soul, of history. Marseille has a history, so why isn't Marseille the domineering force in French football right now, Romain?
Why they don't dominate football? Football?
It's money, yeah.
It's money, yeah. And after is we can tell it's mafia, because they have problem with the supporters, and the problem is they live with the past. They have won the Champions League in 1993, but now 30 years ago after, they think that they are a very good team, but when you see the facts, they are a good team in France, but for example, maybe they will be eliminated by Atletico Bilbao in Europa League. So the problem with Marseille, and they live with their past, and now it's the present, and the past was 30 years ago.
Okay, you mentioned Bilbao. Let's bounce over to El País correspondent Damien over here. Spanish football, of course, on a world scale, has been very dominant in recent seasons.
Absolutely.
What is the secret there? Because it seems to me that Spanish clubs, they have their history, they have their soul, they have, obviously, in the case of Real Madrid and Barcelona, money too. Different aspects there. Is there a real sort of sense of being a football nation in Spain?
And they have also the fighting spirit. I mean, they are competitors. In Spain, they're only living for the win, no? I remember Luis Aragonés, a former trainer. No? in Spain, very famous.
Yeah.
Luis Aragonés said that the only thing important in football is to win. Ganar, ganar y volver a ganar. And thanks to that, he won the Euro Cup and the Euro Cup in 2008. And later, he left a great tribute to Spanish football with this generation, fantastic, with Xavi, Xabi Alonso, Iniesta, and others. And I think it changed the mentality. It changed the mentality, and thanks to that, clubs like Real Madrid or Barcelona grow a bit more, and that's why they are winning 10 years later. They are still winning 10 years later.
And so the factor that makes them different from the other teams in Spain, except perhaps Atletico Madrid, which is kind of clinging on a little bit, is it the investment, is it the money that creates that difference? Because the history is there, the will to win is there, the mentality is there. It's the cash that's the difference.
Yeah, like in Spain, like in Germany, you have just Bayern Munich. In France now you have Paris Saint-Germain. The difference just with that is this season with Juventus and Napoli. Napoli is making a very, very huge season, but the only league that you have suspense is the Premier League, because for the last 5 seasons you have 4 different champions, and this is very good. But otherwise, you have the problem now in Europe is you have 1 or 2 teams, and you know that almost every year
it becomes a little bit monotonous. It was Leicester City who broke that sort of pattern in the English Premier League by coming from nowhere, 5,000 to 1 before the season started, winning the title, an amazing turnaround, but then falling away the following year, maybe proving that if you haven't got the cash and the resources, it doesn't continue. Let's hope that football doesn't fall into those categories. Thank you very much indeed for everybody for the first half of this debate. I'll leave you with the words of Bill Shankly, of course, the great Liverpool manager. Football isn't a matter of life and death. It's much more serious than that. Stay with us. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. Tonight we're looking at Paris Saint-Germain versus Real Madrid and what this means in terms of telling us about the good and the bad in football today. Yes, there is money aplenty, but does that construct happiness and a sustainable model for any football club? And where do the fans fit into all of this? Are they being priced out of the game? It's one of the big questions, of course. The seat that once upon a time cost, say, I don't know, let's say 60 euro cents 25 years ago to sit and watch a game will now cost you possibly, I don't know, maybe 100 euros. Tonight's match, more. 1 ticket. More, how much? 7,000 I saw for 1 ticket.
Yeah. And I've seen just before to come, the first was just 500 euros, but you are behind the goals.
Behind the goal, 500 euros.
After you can have at 1,000, 2,000 euros.
1,000, there you go. That's from Romain Collet-Gaudin, our football commentator from Canal Plus and Eurosport, here to discuss this. Our other guests include Damien Lemaitre, who's sports correspondent for El País. Thank you, sir, very much for joining us. He's a Lille fan, believe it or not, though works on Spanish football. Great to see you. Joining us from Cologne in Germany by Skype, Igor Mladenovic, sports business analyst and commentator for The Guardian. Igor, back to you very shortly. Before we speak to our 3 guests, and we have 2 more coming as well. 1 more just arrived. Ellis Cashmore joining us from Aston University. Ellis, of course, professor of sociology, famous for having written a biography of the Beckhams. There he is. I can see that trademark smile. Ellis, great to see you. Joining you in a moment for your thoughts on this situation. Let's take a listen, though, first, before we bring our guests in to talk about our debate. Let's listen to UEFA's president, Alexander Kefarin, talking about the issues of money, competition, and the future of the game of football.
We have to modernize, we have to bring some new measures. I've spoken many times about it. We have to think about the number of registered players. We have to think about loans of players. We have a club. I just realized last week that has 84 players on loan and 186 under contract. I don't know, it seems a little bit too much.
Sounds like clubs of money hogging the market. Let's bring in Pat Nevin to talk about this, because Pat, of course, played for Chelsea pre-Abramovich, played for Everton when Everton were big hitters and good payers, I understand, Pat, and you won things. But then you went on to be involved with Motherwell Football Club up in Scotland, where you became, I think, the first player chief executive. That must have been quite an experience for you.
Yes, a very complicated one, because the manager was under me, but he was also over me, if you know what I mean. He could drop me for the team, but I could sack him if I wanted. Very, very strange situation to be in. But it was interesting seeing the other side of the game, you know, purely the financial side of the game. And it's much more complex from that side than people would make you believe. And they try to give as much information out as you possibly can. But if you're with a smaller club, it doesn't matter what league you're in. It is very, very difficult indeed. Believe me, we didn't have 84 professional players playing for us, but we tried to get the very best players from within the numbers that we had. And one of the things that was big for us, and it's an imperative to always remember when you're talking about money in football, we wanted to create good players, give them good opportunities, allow them to move on so that they could better their careers, and we could make money out of them so that it could keep us going within the game. Now, in actual fact, the model is imperfect. But people tend to forget that the big clubs, although there are negatives, there are positives too.
And how important, Pat, in your opinion, is this aspect that I keep going on about, and I think people think I'm a bit too romantic, this idea of having heart in the club, of having some kind of belief in the club, this idea that the fans are part of it, that you have that support?
Yes, but to be honest, it's always been thus. You know, the people who own clubs, and even the people that pay for clubs, they're there for a short period of time. The average time a player is generally at a football club, a top club, is 3 or 4 years. So that's not where the heart and soul is. I'm talking to you from the Parc de France here, and I look up to both ends of the stand. The ultras are back in these days, and the noise is incredible. The people who really are the club are the fans, and you always have to remember that. So as long as whoever is in ownership, inverted commas, of the club at that time has an understanding of the fans, then it still works. When they completely forget the groups that come in to support them, then you have a major trouble. And I think there was a difficulty in that within some areas of football, particularly the top echelons of English football, where they forgot about some of the fans for some period of time. And I think some of the atmospheres went out of the games. I think the Premier League clubs in England are beginning to see that now. And you notice that the price increases have stopped with a lot of clubs now. And I wouldn't be surprised very, very soon if you start seeing prices come down so that they make sure these stadiums are full, the atmosphere is good, so that they can sell the TV rights, which is, of course, where the real money is.
Indeed, Pat, indeed. Pat Nevin, always a crowd favourite wherever he played. I can certainly say that when I saw Pat play at Everton. I paid money to watch you play, Pat. You were brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Pat, for your contribution. I hope you enjoyed tonight's game. Hope it goes well for you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Pat Nevin there, former Scotland, Everton, Chelsea, Tranmere, Motherwell football. He played for Clyde as well. Great character and a good advertisement for the game. Let's bring in Ellis Cashmore, who's joining us from central England. Ellis, good evening to you, sir. In terms of what we've been discussing here, we've kind of worked out that without money, you're not going to get success in football. What I'm wondering is, do you feel that the way clubs are structured, the way clubs work and what clubs are, what they mean to their fans, what they mean to the players, what the game means, is money that important factor, or is there something else, another magical kind of element?
Well, I hate to disabuse you of your idealism, Mark, and I know you like to think it's the good old days are still here, or at least some residual quality from those good old days. But I just don't think that the spirit, the soul of the game is around any longer. I hate to disagree with Pat Nevin because he's no longer around to defend himself. But I do disagree. I think that in answer to one of your earlier questions, where does the fan fit in? I think the fan is almost an incidental factor nowadays. I think the customer is now the broadcasting organisation. The clubs are now, or not individually but collectively in most countries, but individually in some, they are doing deals with broadcasters. That's who they're trying to please, because that's where the big money is. Ultimately, of course, the broadcasters have to sell their pay TV subscriptions or their pay-per-view payments to customers or pubs or gyms or bars. And there are actual physical people watching the games. But basically, I don't think the clubs really need the fans any longer. They could afford, I mean, Berlusconi said this years ago, they could afford to let the fans in for nothing. It really wouldn't make that much of an impact on their finances. But, so their customers, the people they're trying to woo, are the heads of large-scale media organizations. Sorry, the soul of the game has gone.
I'm seeing the positives because if I get in for nothing, it'll avoid me paying 60 quid for 2 tickets to watch Everton lose to Tottenham in London, which I did a few months ago. And that was really quite a depressing game. But I hear what you're saying completely. Let's bring in Igor.
There is a silver line.
Let's bring in Igor to talk about this one. Igor joining us from Cologne. Igor Mladenovic of The Guardian. In terms of the fans, Igor, are their days numbered? Could football be played behind closed doors? I'm just thinking as I'm saying this of the kind of crowds you see at the likes of Borussia Dortmund when it's a full house and clearly the atmosphere is a massive factor there.
Yeah, I think Ellis Cashmore is partly right and partly wrong. One of the big themes about tonight's game between Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid is that it is taking place at Parc des Princes, and so for the first time Paris Saint-Germain are hosting in the second leg. Unai Emery has said this might be the whole difference. And one of the things is that the ultra supporters of Paris Saint-Germain, who are populating the popular sections of the stadium, Boulogne and Auteuil, were progressively weeded out by the Qatari owners upon taking over the club. And now, because they represent the soul of the club and the past of the club, they are now brought back. And some of them will be in the stadium tonight to give some atmosphere and push the players. So I think supporters remain a club's soul. It is just that the various owners who take over clubs and who sometimes put TV rights at the forefront of their negotiating strategies, they don't necessarily take into account these supporters. But at the end of the day, even in the Champions League, even tonight between Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid, it is the atmosphere that will play a big part. And of course, the away goal that is worth 2 goals in the Champions League. That's something which is very valuable for a reason.
You have my heart beating with the passion of what you're saying, Igor.
But Igor, that makes the...
Go on, Alice, over to you.
Let me interrupt for a second.
Go ahead.
Because what Igor is saying, it doesn't necessarily undermine anything that I've just said, because what he's saying is that the fans have been brought in to create atmosphere. In other words, they're just scenery now.
Scenery. I remember as a young TV researcher working on broadcast sport, when we were told we were delaying the kickoff because the TV weren't ready or it needed to happen then. And who cared about the fans? That's what the executive producer in TV said. And I felt pretty sad about that as a young idealist football fan. Let's bring in our guys here in the studio, Roman and Damien. Roman, in terms of what we just heard there about the fans, you have obviously had something to say about Auteuil and Boulogne, the fans who may make the difference for Paris Saint-Germain. Yeah, but the thing for me, it was necessary to do things before because there are 2 guys, they are dead, 7... There were incidents where people were killed, there was violence, between it was complicated. Sets of fans, But the problem now is I speak almost every week with former ex-ultra of Paris, and they told me, now with this supporter, with this fan of Paris, I'm not. It's not me. In fact, it's the mood is good for people that they don't know the supporter. But when you're a former fan, when you see that, you think it's not a good atmosphere. Because I have a friend who's also one of these ultras you're talking about who no longer goes to the game because he actually says he can't afford to go to the game. It's become too expensive. Yeah, this and the other thing is I was for the 2 last matches against Marseille in the Preston of Parc des Princes and against Marseille. Sometimes I was looking the stand of Boulogne and no sound of
this.
So you're in the press stand, the tribune press.
Yeah.
You're in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate going there because you want to get involved and you can't.
No.
You're there as a
of
journalist.
course, no, you can't. But when I see,
But you're looking for that and you're not seeing it.
No, just when I saw the Boulogne tribune, was no noise. And you say, you play against Marseille, you are behind the goal, so you are like Auteuil, and you are like in the cinema or the theater. So it's different now for me, the Parc des Princes. Tonight will be a great atmosphere, but if it was 20 years ago, for me,
it would be louder.
Changed.
Let me ask the question of Damian about Real Madrid. Would that happen at the Bernabeu, Real Madrid's ground?
In Madrid, things are very different because Ultra were very were supporting the club, but with violence during a lot of years. The Ultra Sur, and the club decided to drop off, no, to exclude,
to keep them out. Yeah. Okay.
The Ultra Sur because of this act of violence, and they changed the cup by other official supporters, and the atmosphere in Santiago Bernabeu is very official. It's very different from Paris, from the Parc des Princes, and I think I want to remember that for tonight it will be the first time with two cups in Auteuil and also in Boulogne.
Okay.
Things are changing a bit in Paris Saint-Germain, and I think the club understand that they need the supporters. And just one thing, last thing, 2 weeks ago, the club invited Ultra in the Camp des Loges.
That's the training ground.
Training ground,
yeah.
Exactly. So that relationship with supporter is very important.
So getting to know the fans, bringing the fans in, making the fans feel part of that, and by that trying to get some kind of better kind of behaviour. And what's interesting, I think, is that both Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain have their stadiums, their stadia, in very nice parts of the city. Because I'm used to, from the UK, going to football grounds that are in less salubrious parts. You mentioned the word cop to describe the ends of the ground where people are supporting. Of course, the most famous one is Liverpool, which is Anfield's in a really, well, I love Liverpool, but it's a rundown end of the town, and it's even more rundown on the blue side where I go and watch at Goodison Park. It's even worse. Ellis, in terms of what's happening in the game, is it that money factor that is changing the picture of it? Of course, there was the Hillsborough problem in the UK, which brought about a big change in how football was watched. It brought about all-seater stadium, and that was the right thing to do. But has football become a game that is completely different from the popular, as they used to call it, working man's sport?
Well, the rules are the same, but I think practically everything else about the game has changed completely in character. I think you also are right about the watershed moment being Hillsborough, certainly in Britain, and I think that the after effects radiated around the world. Hillsborough really reminded the game that it was stuck in the old days. It was a game that had remained largely untouched for the previous best part of a century, really, and people were addressing it as if it was still that game of yore. The problem was that everything else in the world had changed. And so I think in 89, and after 89, I should say, there was a period of reflection, and football realized that it was in decline, and it may have been in terminal decline. I think people were seriously thinking this is the end of football as we know it. Well, perhaps it was, because out of the ashes of that old football emerged a new type of game, which was dependent on media money. Prior to that, football in Britain, at least, and I suspect the rest of the world, had been very defensive about the media. There was this widespread presumption that if you televised a game, the live fans wouldn't go. They'd stay at home and watch it on TV. And of course, that really kept football's authorities, the governing organisations, from doing any deal with the media at all. They just wanted to keep them at arm's length. After 89, I think there followed this period of reflection in which they decided we will remake the game. And it's not going to be a game that's followed strictly by working class males. We will try and make it more like the NFL in the United States, a family oriented experience. And to do that, to use a word, I hate the word, but it's used quite a lot, gentrified. They spruced the game up. They got rid of the unseemly elements, the racism, the political activities that went on, the violence, of course. They did their best. I won't say they actually expunged these elements from the game completely, but they did the best to get rid of it. And they remade the game anew. Now, in the process, Mark, they really bared their throat because after a few years, it became obvious that football wanted more and more money because it was bringing in high-quality players, celebrities. It was a glamorous, glitzy game, part of the entertainment industry. And to sustain that model, it needed the media's money. So it kept asking for more and more money. Ultimately, of course, it became dependent on the media. And that's the situation that we have today.
Ellis Cashmore, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Igor on the back of that, because I think that brings us nicely to the Champions League, the ultimate, Igor, the ultimate competition created for the television audience, created for the media, wasn't it?
I beg to differ on this one. It was not created for the media when the first competition took place in the 1950s. It was created to bring together a number of clubs across Europe in a coherent way. The reason why it has survived all these decades is because it gives an additional dimension to face a club which is located on the other side of the continent. Now, the financial windfall, of course, is playing an increasing part. But I would say that competitions like the Champions League definitely help clubs create their own sense of identity as they oppose themselves to clubs in other countries, and as they understand that playing football is different whether you are in England, in Germany, in Spain. There are different styles that are being played. So for me, it's above all a question of identity, and that is why tonight Paris Saint-Germain have the opportunity to write a new page in their history, because this is what the Champions League at the end of the day is about.
Igor, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in for some final comments Romain and Damien here in the studio. In terms of what we've heard, do you feel that going on from this point, regardless of the result, regardless of who wins, both Real Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain will remain as clubs with massive identities? I think for Real, that's certainly the point. The question, perhaps, Romain, is whether Paris Saint-Germain could continue to develop, can continue to make that name.
Yes, they can, and obviously it's through the Champions League. For me, if they are eliminated tonight, the project of the Qatari can be... you can think about that, because like Chelsea, like Roman Abramovich has spent more than 1 billion of euros before to become champions. And the Qatari, it's almost the same thing now. So the thing is good to buy a lot of stars, a lot of very good players. But when you see the results, there, 7 years ago, they were in the semi-finals.
I remember when Chelsea couldn't win an argument until they were in Division 2, and they were absolutely, in a parlous state. But it's that money that's got them on and got them to where they are now. And clearly, Real Madrid benefits from the titles it wins, the success it has, and the investment that goes in.
Absolutely. Yeah, in Madrid. For tonight, the issue is different, because the only doubt is about the future of Zidane, of this team with Zidane. But
he always smiles on the press conferences, though, doesn't he? So if it's in doubt, he doesn't seem too worried. Yeah.
It's a bit different for Paris Saint-Germain for tonight. They need to win. They need to demonstrate. They are very strong in Champions League. And for Madrid, that's why Zinedine Zidane yesterday was very relaxed on the press conference.
He's looking a bit fraught there. Unai Emery, though, Paris Saint-Germain's manager, his future's in doubt, isn't it? Because the big stars don't like him, do they? Neymar included.
Yeah, but the thing is, if Paris is eliminated tonight, Emery is finished.
OK. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. That concludes our debate. Media Watch coming up right now. Joining us now to discuss more about football and all that. The game you love, James.
Indeed. There's a build-up.
Paris Saint-Germain versus Real Madrid. Do you have any specific feelings here? Any leanings? Or your thoughts with Cork City?
They are actually. I haven't changed my allegiances.
Good. Glad to hear it.
But there is a buzz online. A lot of people building up to the match. Will Real Madrid?
And that's just for the debate.
Indeed, and it hasn't even happened yet. Put yet another dominating show with their horseman. That's Cristiano Ronaldo in great form. Or will Paris Saint-Germain pull a rabbit out of the hat with home advantage without Neymar? So there's sort of some of the talking points on social media. You have Ladbrokes coming out with some historical facts. Paris Saint-Germain's only previous 3-1 defeat in the first leg away in Europe was 1993. Real Madrid 3-1 loss. And they went on to win the home leg at 4-1. Maybe that was already
getting mentioned. a positive look there. It's
right.
good. Yeah.
OK, well, the historical...
We've discussed that, but it's certainly something that, people...
The historical omens are positive then.
Ladbrokes the bookmakers, eh?
That's right. We have other mentions here of various different configurations in the team. Surprising that Kurzawa is left out completely, along with Nkunku and Cibois. That's one comment. And another person saying important to note that Mbappe starts on the left and Di Maria on the right. That's for the people who know their stuff, unlike me.
Anyway. Like these two gentlemen here.
I presume that means something to people who are really examining the configurations of the different teams. You have Ensemble, on va le faire. That is the sort of, I suppose, curring up of... sort of enthusiasm on social media for Paris Saint-Germain, and they've been tweeting...
It's playing to the fans, bringing the fans in. It's something we were talking about, wasn't it? The fans are important.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're getting a lot of social media content there showing the inside of the dressing rooms, showing the ambience as it's building up. And another person talking about the great atmosphere you have frequently in Parc des Princes, where the player introduction blows that person's mind away. Do or die, says another social media commentator. And so, look, lots of comment on social media and people expressing their enthusiasm and their anticipation for it in all sorts of different forms. And that's only going to build.
And I know you're rushing because you need to get off to watch the game because you're really excited about this, I can tell. Right. Even though you're not a football fan, I know, but the event is there and it's a cultural thing, isn't it?
It's contagious.
Good man. James Crew of Media Watch. Thanks to all our guests in the studio here, Roman Coligonan from Canal Plus and Eurosport. Thank you. Thank you to our man from El País, Damien Lemaitre. Thank you very much indeed. Lille fan, no less. And thanks to our friends joining us from afar. Igor Mladenovic coming from Cologne, from The Guardian. Pat Nevin, the football star, who was one of my favourites when he played. And, of course, Elias Cashmore joining us from the University of Aston. Sociologist and man with a popular eye on the game and on everything else. The guy with real opinions and things to say. Enjoy the game. And thank you for joining us in this debate. Stay with us.